Jack Raven had recently settled in the picturesque Pine Creek Valley, nestled in the majestic Wyoming mountains. To the locals, he was just a quiet farmer who mostly kept to himself. Few noticed his military stance and his sharp gaze that examined every small detail around him. No one in the valley knew that the hard-working farmer was once a legendary commander of the elite Delta Force, with the call sign Shadow, a presence that came silently and disappeared without a trace. One cold morning, Jack walked along the border of his country, accompanied by his faithful German shepherd, Atlas. With a trained eye, he noticed fresh tire tracks in the wet ground. The deepest impressions came from heavy vehicles that were not owned by any of the local residents. Something was happening in the valley, and it clearly wasn't good. His neighbor, Sarah Foster, confirmed his worst fears. A Mexican cartel had recently arrived in the valley. The criminals systematically bought up farms, and those who refused to sell were intimidated into surrender. In the past month, 7 properties have already fallen into the hands of the cartel. For Jack, this was not just information, but also a tactical assessment. His farm was strategically located because it controlled the main road and many of the access routes into the valley. It was clear that the cartel would catch up with him sooner or later. When Jack returned home, he opened the hidden compartment he had created when he bought the property. His friends called it paranoia, but Jack called it preparation. Hidden under a layer of ordinary tools was military communications equipment, weapons, and tactical gear, everything he might need if the situation got out of hand. He hoped he would never need any of them, but years of service had taught him to always be prepared for the worst. Throughout the day, Jack watched the gang's black SUVs drive slowly through his gates and explore the area. They were clearly choosing their next destination. Jack began to contact his old teammates, the men who fought alongside him in uncharted places on the map and carried out missions the world would never know about. Their sniper, Hunter Raven, was the first to report. Dustin Demo, the explosives expert, then agreed to attend, followed by Eric Ghost, the communications specialist, and Marcus Dock, their medic. Together they have always been a force to be reckoned with even by the strongest of enemies. Even though each of them was now over 50 years old, the cartel had no idea what kind of retirees they would be dealing with. Jack's plans suddenly change when he learns the next day that his friend Michael Baker has been attacked. Michael was the only person in the valley who welcomed Jack with an open heart, helping him fix his barn and teaching him how to run a local farm. Now Michael was in a coma after being brutally beaten by cartel men, all because he refused to sell the land that had been in his family for generations. At the hospital, Jack meets Michael's wife, Alice, and their 14-year-old son, Tommy. Despite the shock, the boy showed incredible observational skills and described the attackers in detail: a scar on one man's face, a crown tattoo on the back of another's neck, and a set of rosaries in a third man's hand. Jack immediately realized that Tommy had a rare talent for noticing things that most people miss in stressful situations. Jack understood the danger to his friend's family and insisted that Alice and Tommy stay with him temporarily while Michael was in the hospital. He knew his ranch was the only place they would be safe if the cartel decided to come after them again. Now it's personal. It was not just about protecting the land, but also about protecting the innocent and defending the way of life in this valley. Jack gathered his team at an abandoned sawmill and informed them of the seriousness of the situation. Everyone realized they had much less time to prepare than they had initially thought. The cartel moved faster and more aggressively than expected. On the way home with Michael's family, Jack sees the familiar black SUV heading toward Miller's ranch, which the cartel had recently taken over. Jack puts Alice and Tommy in a guest house in the remotest and safest part of his property. Immediately, the faithful Atlas took the boy under his protection and stayed by his side, as if he realized the importance of his role. That evening, while sitting on the porch, Tommy asked Jack directly if he was really just a farmer. Jack didn't lie to the boy. He told him that he was someone else, but now he just wanted to live in peace like everyone else in the valley. When Tommy asks if he can stop the men who hurt his father, Jack promises he will do everything in his power to bring justice. The next morning, just as Jack had predicted, 3 black SUVs arrived at his farm. 5 men in expensive suits emerged from the vehicles. Their leader, Raul El Corte Mendez, his lips curled into a businesslike smile that barely concealed his predatory gaze. Jack counted 2 other men standing in the vehicles, their hands close to their weapons, ready to draw at any moment. Mendez introduced himself as a representative of an investment group that wanted to buy Jack's land. He didn't even try to negotiate and immediately offered $3 million in cash, an amount far above the actual market value of the farm. Jack politely but firmly refused, explaining that the land was not for sale. Mendez's smile deepened. He resorted to veiled threats, pointing out that the valley was changing, and that those who refused to accept these changes were often subjected to accidents, especially the stubborn old men who didn't recognize a good deal when offered it to them. Jack notices two cartel men surveying his property, marking lines of sight and potential defensive positions. These were not real estate agents, but an advance party gathering information in preparation for a possible attack. During the conversation, Jack deliberately called Mendez by name, even if he didn't introduce himself. It was a calculated move to let him know that Jack knew more than he was saying. When he saw the brief flash of uncertainty on Mendez's face, Jack knew his message had gotten through. As the meeting ended, Mendez casually pointed out how unfortunate it would be if something happened to Atlas. "That would be a very big mistake," Jack replied, his voice hardened by years of experience. Something in his tone made Mendez hesitate for a split second. They expected to find an ordinary old farmer, someone they could intimidate or buy. Instead, they encountered something completely different, one that made them uncomfortable. After the unwanted visitors left, Jack activated his actual security system. Hidden cameras mounted on trees monitored every entrance to the farm. Motion sensors recorded every movement along the site. Everything was moved to the command center he had set up in the basement of his house, a bygone habit of preparing for the worst-case scenario. Jack knew they didn't have much time. The cartel will not wait a full 24 hours as it promised. They saw something in his behavior that made them suspicious. This means they will come back sooner and stronger. But Jack and his team were ready. It wasn't just about a piece of land. It was about protecting the lives of innocent people, including his friend's family, who were now under his protection. Night fell, quiet and starry. Jack placed his team in pre-planned defensive points. Hunter took up a sniper position on the northern watchtower, where he had a perfect view of the main entrance. Dustin has rigged key access points with explosives and set traps for uninvited guests. Eric calibrated his devices to intercept enemy communications. Marcus set up an infirmary in the basement, ready for whatever might come. The first alarm went off shortly after midnight. The surveillance system detected a convoy of 20 vehicles heading towards the valley. It was clear that the cartel had mobilized all available forces. They were no longer pretending to be businessmen. This was a large-scale operation. Through his night vision goggles, Jack watched the caravan approaching his farm. 40 armed men moved in disciplined formations. Someone has trained her well, but they forgot the first rule of battle: never fight on ground prepared by the enemy. The cartel forces split into 3 groups. The main force advanced along the central road, while 2 escort squads moved to the flanks and attempted to encircle the farm. Jack ordered his team not to fire until the enemy was in their trap. They need to feel safe before they realize they're not. When the first vehicles reached the perimeter, cartel members emerged with their weapons and moved in tight, rehearsed formations. Raul Mendez got out of the armored SUV and directed his men with subtle gestures. "Surround the farm. No one leaves the farm alive," he ordered in Spanish. When the enemy reached the designated point, Jack gave the signal. Dustin detonated the first set of explosives. The ground beneath the lead vehicles exploded in a violent explosion, sending them flying in a whirlwind of dust and shrapnel. The dust hadn't even settled when Hunter opened fire from his concealed position. 2 cartel soldiers fell before they realized they were under attack. "What the hell?" Mendez shouted as he jumped for cover. "Where's the shooter?" The silence of the night instantly turned into chaos. Jack's team had carefully prepared their defensive positions, and now the locals had joined the fight. Every time the cartel forces tried to regroup, they were immediately caught in a deadly shootout. Jack moved like a ghost in the dark, his years of combat experience guiding his every step. He ambushed 2 cartel members, disarmed one, and used him as a shield against the other's bullets. They both fell silently to the ground. "Who the hell are these people?" a cartel member shouted over his radio. "Something's wrong here. They're too organized." Mendez's voice cut through the chaos. "These are professionals. Retreat to the vehicles. Take up defensive positions." But it was already too late. Jack detonated another series of explosives, cutting off their escape route and trapping them in the kill zone. The hunter's rifle spoke again, systematically eliminating the remaining threats. The first wave of cartel attacks has collapsed. What began as a confident attack became a desperate battle for survival. Of the original 20 vehicles, only 8 burned. Of the 40 men Mendez brought with him, less than half were still alive. Full retreat, Mendez ordered. Immediate retreat to the assembly point. I don't think so, Jack replied calmly. The hunter's rifle fired 3 more shots, slashing the tires of the remaining vehicles and sealing the cartel's fate. Phantasma will kill us all, Mendez muttered, realizing the trap they had fallen into. Jack stepped out of the shadows behind Mendez. Phantasma should have done his job, he said. He should at least know who owns this farm. Mendez turned and raised his weapon, but he wasn't fast enough. Jack's punch was accurate and effective. The cartel leader collapsed unconscious while the remaining gunmen surrendered. The ocean is secure, Hunter reported. There are no escapees. Marcos had already begun treating and stabilizing the injured cartel members. Eric intercepted new information. The cartel reinforcements were still on their way, about 20 minutes away. This time they brought heavier guns. Jack's team quickly regrouped, checking weapons and reloading ammunition. The night wasn't over yet, and this was just the beginning. The real battle was still ahead. Just like the old days, Marcus commented as he tended to a wounded guerrilla soldier. Better, Jack replied, loading fresh cartridges into his gun. This time we are fighting on our terms, on our land, and this time we will end this once and for all. The second wave hit like a storm. Machine gun fire lit up the night, and heavy caliber rifles tore through Jack's outer defenses. The cartel forces moved with professional precision, using suppressive fire to cover their advance. This was not an uncoordinated attack like the first wave, but a large-scale military operation. Several squads at 9, Hunter reported, firing accurate shots. They used good shooting and maneuvering tactics. These are not your ordinary cartel members. Jack watched through his heat vision as the elite Phantasma forces took up strategic positions. He confirmed that the former Mexican Special Forces. Look how they move. They've done this before. A missile pierced the darkness and hit Jack's barn. The reinforced structure had held up, and was designed for such a scenario. But the message was clear. The cartel is no longer playing along. They used incendiary weapons and tried to drive Jack's team out of their prepared positions. The night was lit up with bursts of fire and explosions, turning the battlefield into a fiery inferno. They're getting more and more desperate, Hunter commented, shifting his position as fire engulfed his former sniper's nest. They make more mistakes. Stay alert, Jack warned. Desperate men are unpredictable. The cartel's elite force, known as Los Fantasmas, breached the inner cordon and moved toward the command center with deadly efficiency. Jack tried to intercept them, but the militants surrounded him with coordinated suppressive fire. I need a backup, Jack screamed, his voice calm despite the bullets flying through the air around him. We're working on it, Dustin replied. The ground beneath the death squad exploded, not with explosives, but with compressed air and dirt. The non-fatal explosion confused the cartel fighters and broke their formation. Jack took advantage of the gap and closed the distance in an instant. The battle was brutal and fast. The cartel soldiers were excellent snipers, but Jack had spent decades perfecting the art of hand-to-hand combat. The first man fell after a strong blow to his throat. The second managed to land a powerful blow before Jack's elbow hit the nerve node behind his ear. The third was more rigorous and clearly specialized in close combat. Impressive, the man said with an accent, and assumed a fighting stance. But you're still just a pathetic old man. Jack's response was a quick combination of punches that ended with the cartel specialist falling unconscious to the ground. Age and cunning. Boy, Jack said simply, a new threat has appeared on the horizon. The cartel brought heavy artillery and armored truck with a 20mm machine gun powerful enough to penetrate Jack's reinforced walls. This is no longer an attempt to take over the farm. It was total destruction. Hunter, can you take the picture? Jack asked. They protected the picture very well. Jack made a quick decision. The cannon was devastating, but like all weapons it had its weaknesses. Dustin, do you remember Somalia? The armory with the tanks? Yeah, that was. Oh, I like what you're getting at. I can do that. Give me 2 minutes. Phantasma's voice came over the radio, sharp and commanding. This is what happens to those who oppose the cartel. We will turn this place to ash." The machine gun continued to fire relentlessly, but Jack had seen the worst in his life. "Eric, tune me in. It's time to teach our friend a lesson." "Deal." Jack's voice was cold and professional. "It's an impressive weapon. Russian-made, probably stolen from a military depot, but it's not nearly as effective against what I've prepared for you." "You are damned," Phantasma roared. "Your defense is crumbling. Look to the left." The cartel boss did just that, just in time to catch Dustin off guard. The burning barn, which they had assumed was merely collateral damage, suddenly revealed its true purpose. The entire building was transformed into a massive, directed explosion that focused its force directly onto the truck containing the machine gun. The explosion wasn't meant to be destructive, that would have been too dangerous. Instead, it created a shockwave that flipped the vehicle upside down, neutralizing the cannon and sending the Phantasma men fleeing. "We were just being polite," Jack declared. "If we get tougher, we won't be there anymore." Phantasma immediately ordered his men to kill every peasant, but there was now a clear hint of fear in his voice. His forces died or surrendered one by one. Its best fighters were neutralized and its heavy weapons were systematically dismantled. Jack gave the order for the final stage. For Phantasma and his men, the night became a living nightmare. At one point, the armed cartel members believed they had the upper hand and forced Jack's team to retreat. In fact, they had fallen directly into the ultimate trap that the farmer had set from the very beginning. Jack watched as the remaining Phantasma forces gathered around the command vehicle exactly where he wanted them. The cartel leader thought he was making a smart move by regrouping his surviving men. In fact, he had gathered them all in the perfect killing zone. "Initiate Phoenix Protocol," Jack commanded. His team confirmed the matter without hesitation. "They have rehearsed this scenario countless times during their active service." "Get ready for some fireworks," Dustin announced. "Are the shipments we haven't used before?" "They've been secured and loaded." Hunter's voice was cold and precise. "Clear vision. All of your top people are in my sight. Remember, we need survivors." Jack reminded her. They need to send a message to the cartel. The counterattack was executed with surgical precision. Dustin's explosives exploded one after another, not to kill, but to cut off any escape route. Walls of fire and smoke forced the cartel forces exactly where Jack wanted them. "What the hell are they doing?" The Phantasma student watched as his carefully positioned men were suddenly pushed into a death trap under relentless crossfire. "They're giving you a real lesson in war. Watch out," Jack replied over the cartel radio. "That's how the pros do it." Hunter's rifle fired first, disabling the cartel's communications systems with 3 well-aimed shots. Then vehicle after vehicle was rendered unusable, each engine destroyed with ruthless efficiency. The cartel forces were now deaf, blind, and stranded. "Think this changes anything?" the Phantasma roared, but there was panic in his voice. "I still have men. I still have firepower." "Not anymore," Jack replied as Eric's equipment jammed the cartel's radio signals with deafening interference. "Right now, the police are capturing your reinforcements on their way here." Funny how things change when someone tips off the feds on a major cartel operation. At dawn, the battle was over. The cartel forces were completely destroyed, and the surviving members sat bound with cable ties under Marcus' watchful eye. The state police and FBI arrived to arrest the criminals and gather evidence of their illegal activities. Jack watched the rising sun illuminate his damaged but intact ranch. The cartel had brought its best people with it: ex-special forces, hitmen, military equipment. They had the advantage in numbers and firepower, but they had learned the hard way that some battles are won not by brute force but by skill. A handful of old men not only defended the ranch but also thwarted the cartel's grand plans to make this valley a major hub for drug trafficking from Mexico. "You know, maybe the abandoned cartel property is worth auctioning off," Dustin mused as he watched the last FBI vehicle disappear down the dirt road. "They're in good tactical positions." Jack smiled. The soldier in him appreciated strategy, controlling important terrain, securing a defensive perimeter around the valley. The farmer in him liked good land in the right hands. "One thing's for sure," Hunter added, scanning the horizon with a trained sniper's eye. "No one will ever look at this valley the same way again." Sometimes the unknown is the best deterrent. There's a chance that behind every farmer, behind every rancher, lurks something far more dangerous than he realizes. In the weeks that followed, the Pine Creek Valley began to change. Jack's team purchased abandoned cartel properties at auction. Hunter bought the old Wilson property, which provided an ideal vantage point overlooking the valley. Marcus took on the task of renovating an abandoned clinic so the community could receive medical care. Eric installed advanced communications systems throughout the valley under the guise of expanding the amateur radio network. Dustin upgraded the ranch's equipment, making it more durable and efficient while secretly adding safety features. But the biggest change wasn't in the infrastructure, it was in the people. Jack began training the locals. He didn't turn them into soldiers, he helped them become more aware, more organized, and more protective of their way of life. The farmers and ranchers learned to spot suspicious strangers, coordinate with each other, and warn the community of potential threats. Michael Baker regained consciousness 3 weeks after the attack. His recovery was slow but steady, especially under Marcus' care. When he finally returned to his home, his farm had already been rebuilt through the collective efforts of the valley's residents. Now trained by Jack in the basics of surveillance and security, Tommy becomes one of the most valuable members of the valley's new defense system, his eyes and ears, picking up on details others might miss. Word spread quickly in criminal circles about the valley's inaccessibility. No one dared to test the defenses anymore. There were rumors of paranormal events, of mysterious accidents that befell those who were very interested in Pine Creek. It has become known as the Valley of Ghosts, a place where even the most dangerous criminals seem to disappear without a trace. One day, the county sheriff asked Jack if this story would ever really end. Jack just smiled and looked at the quiet fields and grazing cattle. On the surface, the valley was a quiet agricultural corner of Wyoming, but beneath this calm was an invisible network of protection, not a military base, not a walled fence, but a community that had learned to defend itself. That evening, as he sat on his porch watching the sunset, Jack thought about the transformation that had taken place in the valley. Not only did they repel the cartel's attack, but they built something unique, a place where ordinary people, united by a common goal, became a force to be reckoned with. The place where Jack's past, the elusive shadow, found a new purpose, not in war and destruction, but in protecting a peaceful way of life. Atlas was dozing at his feet as the lights of the valley farms flickered on each one, now more than just a home, but an important part of a larger whole. Some battles are won not by firepower, but by the power of community. Sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones that don't seem threatening until it's too late.